The sound that haunts me isn't my daughter's flatline. It's her husband's laughter. I'm standing in ICU room 314 at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching Katie breathe through a machine while her kidneys shut down from poison. 29 years old, third-grade teacher, never hurt anyone in her life. The dialysis machine hums like a prayer, filtering death from her blood one drop at a time. My phone buzzes. Instagram notification. Pat's story update. There he is on a yacht deck in Miami. Champagne glass raised high, arm wrapped around a blonde in a bikini who isn't my daughter. The timestamp reads 1:14 p.m., 2 hours ago. While Katie lay dying, her husband was celebrating. But it's the sound that breaks something inside me. I tap the screen and hear it. His laugh. Pure, genuine joy. The kind of laugh you make when everything is going exactly according to plan. I stand there holding my phone, staring at my unconscious daughter, listening to the man who promised to love her forever celebrate her suffering. That's when I understand the difference between a bad husband and a predator. A bad husband would be here, even if he didn't care. A predator goes on vacation. The nurse walks by, chart in hand. "Any word from her husband, Mr. Donovan?" "He's handling some business in Florida," I hear myself say. Handling business. In that moment, I realize Pat isn't just absent. He's confident. Confident enough to party while his wife dies because he knows exactly why she's dying. He's not worried about her recovery because he never intended for her to recover. 40 years of building an empire taught me one thing. When someone tries to destroy what you love, you don't just stop them. You make sure they can never try again. Let me tell you how a father discovered his son-in-law was the perfect killer, and how I used every weapon in my arsenal to serve him justice so cold it would make a Seattle winter feel like summer. 3 days earlier, I was sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor of the Donovan building in downtown Seattle, reviewing expansion plans for our West Coast operations. The view stretched from Elliott Bay to the Olympic Mountains, but I wasn't admiring the scenery. I was focused on numbers, projections, the kind of detailed analysis that had built Donovan Family Dining from a single pizza joint I'd opened in 1983 into a restaurant empire spanning 500 locations across the Pacific Northwest and California. Our annual revenue had hit $2.8 billion last year. The business consumed most of my waking hours, but that Tuesday morning, November 15th, I wasn't thinking about profit margins or quarterly reports. I was thinking about Katie. She'd been my entire world since the day she was born, especially after her mother Sarah died 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer that took her in 4 brutal months. Katie was our only child. We'd tried for more babies, but life had different plans. Sarah always said Katie got the best of both of us, my analytical mind and her compassionate heart. When Katie chose teaching over joining the family business, I respected that choice completely. She wanted to make her own way in the world, earn her own money, build her own life. I admired that independence, even if it meant she lived in a modest townhouse instead of the penthouse I could have bought her. When she married Patrick Walsh 3 years ago, I welcomed him into our family with genuine warmth. Pat seemed utterly devoted to Katie, worked as a marketing manager for a mid-sized consulting firm downtown, and appeared to genuinely love her. Sure, he was maybe a little too interested in the family wealth, asking questions about the business and making comments about financial security, but what son-in-law wouldn't be curious about a father-in-law worth north of $50 million? The original plan was to spend 10 days in Los Angeles, finalizing our acquisition of a regional chain called Coastal Kitchen, 23 locations that would give us a foothold in Southern California. It was the kind of deal that required my personal attention, face-to-face meetings with owners who'd built their restaurants from nothing, and wanted assurance that Donovan Family Dining would respect their legacy. But Katie hadn't returned my calls for 2 straight days. That wasn't like her. We talked every other day without fail, a routine we'd maintained since her mother's death. She'd call me Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and I'd call her Saturday mornings. It was our way of staying connected without me being an overbearing father. Pat kept texting me instead of Katie calling, sending brief messages. Katie's feeling under the weather, and she's sleeping a lot, doesn't want to talk on the phone, and just needs rest. You know how she gets when she's stressed. Something felt wrong. After 40 years in business, You develop instincts about people and situations that go beyond logic or evidence. Those instincts had saved me millions of dollars over the years, helped me identify dishonest suppliers, unreliable partners, and deals that looked good on paper but felt wrong in practice. Now those same instincts were screaming at me to get home immediately. I called my pilot at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Time on November 18th. "Jim, we're flying back to Seattle this morning. Cancel the rest of the LA meetings." "Everything okay, Mr. Donovan?" "I hope so, but I need to be home." The flight from Los Angeles to Seattle took 2 hours and 37 minutes. I spent most of it staring out the window at the patchwork of farmland below, trying to shake the feeling that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. Katie had seemed tired lately during our phone calls, mentioned headaches and nausea that she attributed to work stress. Pat said it was the usual challenges teachers face: budget cuts at the school district, larger class sizes, difficult parents. But Katie had handled stress before. This felt different. As we approached SeaTac Airport, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going home first, I would drive straight to Katie's house in Capitol Hill and check on her personally. What I found there led me to Mercy General Hospital. What I discovered at the hospital changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The emergency room receptionist at Mercy General looked at me with the kind of practiced sympathy that comes from delivering bad news to families every day. Her name tag read Sandra, and she couldn't have been older than 25. "Mr. Donovan, your daughter Katie was admitted yesterday evening around 7:15 p.m. Acute kidney failure. She's in the ICU, room 314 on the 3rd floor." Yesterday evening. Katie had been in this hospital for 18 hours, and no one had called me. My emergency contact information was on file at every major hospital in the Seattle area. Standard protocol for a man in my position. You prepare for every contingency when you have wealth and responsibilities. "Who brought her in?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Her husband, Patrick Walsh. He said she'd been feeling sick for several days, then collapsed at home around dinner time. The paramedics said she was unconscious when they arrived. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like it took forever. I passed a gift shop, a small chapel, and a vending machine area where families gathered during long vigils. Room 314 was at the end of the ICU hallway, behind heavy double doors marked Intensive Care Unit, authorized personnel only. I had to check in with the nurses' station first. "Mr. Donovan," the charge nurse said, recognizing me immediately. "I'm so sorry about Katie. Dr. Stevens will want to speak with you right away." Dr. Rebecca Stevens was a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct manner that comes from delivering difficult diagnoses to worried families for over 20 years. We'd known each other since Sarah's illness. Dr. Stevens had been part of the oncology team that tried to save my wife. "Chuck," she said, using the nickname only close friends were allowed. "Katie's condition is serious. Stage 4 acute kidney failure, which means her kidneys have essentially shut down. We've got her on continuous dialysis to filter the toxins from her blood, but we need to understand what caused this. A healthy 29-year-old doesn't just go into complete renal failure. What do you think happened?" "That's what we're trying to figure out. Her symptoms suggest possible toxin exposure, but the standard tests haven't identified anything specific. Patrick mentioned she'd been having headaches, nausea, and increasing fatigue for several months. He said she thought it was work stress and refused to see a doctor." Several months. Where is Patrick now? Dr. Stevens checked her tablet computer. He'd left around midnight last night, said he needed to go home, get some rest, and take care of some work obligations. He promised he'd be back first thing this morning. She looked at her watch. "We haven't seen him yet, and it's after 3 p.m. I looked at my Rolex, 3:20 p.m. Pat had been absent for over 15 hours while his wife fought for her life in intensive care. Any devoted husband would have slept in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, would have been here when she woke up, would have been demanding answers from every doctor and nurse on the floor. That's when I decided to check his social media accounts. I'd never been much for Facebook or Instagram. Social media felt like a waste of time for someone my age. But I'd created accounts to keep up with Katie's posts. She shared pictures of her classroom, her students' artwork, family dinners at my house. Through her account, I could see Pat's posts too. The Instagram story hit me like a physical blow to the chest. There was Pat on the deck of a luxury yacht, clearly somewhere tropical based on the turquoise water and palm trees in the background. He was wearing expensive designer sunglasses I'd never seen before and holding up a champagne flute filled with what looked like Dom Perignon. Around him were people who looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Beautiful women in tiny bikinis, men in linen shirts that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. The blonde woman leaning against Pat had her hand possessively on his chest. She was young, maybe early 20s, with the kind of artificial perfection that suggested expensive cosmetic procedures. She definitely wasn't my daughter. The timestamp on the video was 1:14 p.m., about 2 hours before I'd arrived at the hospital. While Katie lay unconscious and dying, her husband was partying in Florida. I screenshot the video and immediately called Pat's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Pat Walsh. I'm probably busy making great things happen, so leave a message and I'll get back to you." The casual arrogance in his voice made my stomach turn. I tried again 5 minutes later. Still voicemail. That's when I stopped thinking Patrick Walsh was just a selfish, irresponsible husband and started wondering if he was something much worse. I found Dr. Stevens at the nurse's station 20 minutes later, reviewing patient charts with 2 other physicians. When she saw my expression, she immediately stepped aside to speak privately. "Dr. Stevens," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest, "I need you to run a comprehensive toxicology panel on Katie. Test for everything: recreational drugs, prescription medications, industrial chemicals, household poisons, everything you can think of." She looked surprised by the urgency in my request. "Chuck, that's an extremely extensive and expensive battery of tests. The insurance company might not approve coverage for such broad testing without specific clinical indicators. I'll pay for it personally. Every test, every consultation, every specialist you want to bring in. Money is not a consideration." Something in my voice must have convinced her I was completely serious. "Can you tell me why you want this comprehensive testing?" I showed her the screenshot of Pat's Instagram story, explaining the timestamp and his absence from the hospital. Katie's husband is currently on a yacht in what appears to be Miami or the Bahamas, partying with people I don't recognize while she's fighting for her life. He told you he'd be back this morning. It's now almost 4 p.m., and he's not answering his phone. Dr. Stevens studied the image for a long moment, her expression growing more concerned. "I'll order the full toxicological workup immediately. Results will take 24 to 48 hours for the standard tests, potentially longer for more exotic compounds." How long has she been experiencing symptoms? Really experiencing them, I mean, not just feeling tired or stressed. According to Patrick's account, about 3 to 4 months. It started with morning nausea and headaches, which he said she attributed to work stress. Then came increasing fatigue, occasional confusion, and difficulty concentrating. He mentioned she'd been having trouble remembering things lately, forgetting appointments, losing her keys, that sort of thing. 4 months. I thought back to family dinners, phone conversations, the few times I'd seen Katie and Pat together recently. She had seemed different, more tired than usual, quieter during conversations, less animated when talking about her students. I had attributed it to the normal stresses of teaching, to the budget cuts and increased class sizes that had been affecting Seattle schools. Had I missed the signs? Had I been so focused on business that I'd failed to notice my daughter was slowly dying? After leaving the hospital, I drove straight to Katie's house in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. She and Pat lived in a modest 2-bedroom townhouse that Katie had insisted on buying herself, despite my repeated offers to help with a down payment, or to simply buy her something larger and more secure. "I need to know I can make it on my own, Dad," she'd told me. "I need to prove to myself that I don't need the family money to survive." I had a key to their house. Katie had given it to me after Sarah died, in case of emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. The house felt wrong the moment I walked through the front door. It was too clean, too organized, like someone had been methodically scrubbing away evidence of something. Katie was naturally neat, but this level of cleanliness felt artificial, purposeful. The kitchen was spotless, counters wiped down, dishes put away, no sign that anyone had cooked or eaten there recently. I opened the cabinet under the kitchen sink where Katie kept her cleaning supplies. Everything was organized differently than usual. Katie was particular about household organization. a trait she'd inherited from her mother, and I'd been in this house enough times to know her patterns. The arrangement of products looked like someone else had organized them. I walked out to the attached garage through the kitchen door. Pat's workbench was neat and organized, with tools hung precisely on pegboard and several oil stains on the concrete floor where he worked on his car. But there was something odd about one of the shelves. There was an empty, rectangular space where something had been sitting. The outline was clearly visible in the dust. Something about the size and shape of that empty space nagged at me. I started looking through Pat's filing cabinet, which was located in a corner of the garage. The first drawer contained typical household documents, insurance papers, car registration, utility bills. The second drawer had Pat's personal financial records. I found what I was looking for in a manila folder labeled Receipts 2024. The receipt was from Home Depot, dated July 23rd, exactly 4 months ago. 1 gallon of ethylene glycol antifreeze, $24.99 paid for with Pat's Visa card. Ethylene glycol, the main component in automotive antifreeze. I knew enough about chemistry from my college days to understand that ethylene glycol was extremely toxic if ingested, and I knew enough about symptoms from Sarah's medical treatments to recognize that ethylene glycol poisoning would cause exactly the symptoms Dr. Stevens had described: nausea, headaches, fatigue, confusion, and eventually complete kidney failure. Small doses over time would be nearly impossible to detect without specific testing. The poison would accumulate in Katie's system slowly, mimicking illness or stress-related symptoms until her kidneys finally shut down completely. But I needed to be absolutely certain before I accused my son-in-law of attempting to murder my daughter. That receipt, combined with Katie's symptoms and Pat's behavior, was painting a picture I desperately didn't want to believe. But 40 years of business had taught me that wanting something to be false doesn't make it false. The call from Dr. Stevens came at 7:23 a.m. the next morning, November 19th. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee I couldn't taste and staring at that Home Depot receipt, when my phone rang. "Chuck, you need to sit down. The preliminary toxicology results came back, and you were right to be suspicious. Katie has ethylene glycol in her blood. She's been poisoned, and based on the metabolite levels we're seeing, it's been happening consistently for months." I was sitting down, but I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me anyway. How much ethylene glycol? Enough to cause severe kidney damage. We're looking at levels that indicate chronic exposure rather than acute poisoning. Someone has been giving your daughter small doses of antifreeze over an extended period of time. How long does she have? The good news is that we caught it before permanent damage occurred. The dialysis is filtering the remaining toxins from her system, and we're treating her with fomepizole to prevent further metabolic damage. She should make a full recovery, but Chuck, someone has been deliberately poisoning your daughter for months. I sat in my car in the Mercy General parking lot for 20 minutes after that phone call, staring at my phone and trying to process what I just learned. Pat was still posting Instagram stories from Miami. The latest showed him at what looked like an expensive seafood restaurant, tagged at Joe's Stone Crab on South Beach. He was smiling broadly, laughing at something off camera, living his best life while his wife recovered from poisoning he had caused. 40 years of running a business had taught me valuable lessons about dealing with threats, whether they came from competitors, dishonest suppliers, or employees who tried to embezzle money. The key was never to react emotionally. You gathered information, built an airtight case, and then you acted decisively and completely. When suppliers tried to cheat me by delivering substandard products, I didn't get angry. I gathered evidence, documented everything, and then I destroyed their reputation in the industry so thoroughly that they never worked again. When competitors tried to undercut me with predatory pricing, I didn't retaliate immediately. I studied their business model, found their weaknesses, and then I outmaneuvered them so completely that they usually ended up selling their businesses to me at bankruptcy prices. This situation required the same methodical approach, but with stakes higher than any business deal I'd ever handled. My first call was to Ray Morrison, a private investigator I'd used for various business matters over the years. Ray was a former Seattle police detective who'd retired after 25 years and started his own investigation firm. He was thorough, discreet, and absolutely ruthless when the situation called for it. Over the years, He'd help me investigate everything from embezzling employees to potential acquisition targets who weren't being honest about their finances. "Chuck," Ray answered on the second ring. "Haven't heard from you in a while. What can I do for you?" "I need a complete financial investigation on Patrick Walsh, my son-in-law. I'm talking about a deep dive, credit history, bank accounts, investment portfolios, debts, spending patterns, everything you can legally access. And I need it fast." "How fast are we talking?" 24 hours, 48 maximum. "That's going to cost extra for the rush job and the weekend work." "Bill me whatever it takes." "And Ray, this is personal. Someone tried to kill my daughter." Ray's voice immediately became more serious. "Jesus, Chuck, are you okay? Is Katie?" "Katie's alive, but it was close. I'll explain everything when you have the financial information. Can you handle this?" "Absolutely. I'll have preliminary results by tomorrow evening." My second call was to Marcus Thompson, the head of my legal team. Marcus had been with Donovan Family Dining for 12 years, specializing in corporate litigation, contract disputes, and the occasional criminal matter when employees got creative with company funds. He was smart, aggressive, and completely unscrupulous when it came to protecting my interests. "Marcus, I need you to assemble a litigation team immediately. We're looking at a potential criminal case involving attempted murder. The target is a family member." Marcus was quiet for a moment. In 12 years of working together, I'd never asked him to handle anything like this. "Chuck, are you okay? Is this about Katie?" "Katie's alive, but someone tried to poison her. I need lawyers who can handle evidence collection, criminal procedure, and potentially a civil case for attempted murder, assault, and fraud." "I'll have a team assembled within 2 hours. Do you want me to contact the police?" "Not yet. I want to have an airtight case before we involve law enforcement. This person is smart enough that we need to be smarter." My third call was to Consolidated Security Services, the company that handled surveillance and alarm systems for all my restaurant locations. I needed cameras installed at Katie's house immediately, hidden cameras that could document what happened when Pat eventually returned from his Florida vacation. "This is Charles Donovan. I need a complete surveillance system installed at 1247 East Pine Street today. Hidden cameras, audio recording, motion detection, the works. And I need it done while the residents are away, Mr. Donovan, is this for a commercial or residential property?" "Residential. It's my daughter's house, and I'm the emergency contact and key holder. Someone has been trying to hurt her, and I need evidence." Within 6 hours, I had a team of 4 private investigators, 3 attorneys, 2 forensic accountants, and a surveillance specialist all working on the case. The cost was running about $15,000 per day, but that was pocket change compared to what was at stake. By 8 p.m. that evening, Ray Morrison called with preliminary results. "Chuck, you're not going to like what I found. Tell me everything." "Patrick Walsh is drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out at $165,000, most of it accumulated over the past 18 months. Based on the spending patterns, a lot of this is gambling debt, online poker, sports betting, some high-stakes games in private clubs. He's been living way above his means for at least 2 years, $165,000 in debt. Pat earned maybe $75,000 per year at his marketing job. There was no way he could ever pay back that kind of money on his salary." "But here's the really interesting part," Ray continued. 6 months ago, Patrick took out a life insurance policy on Katie. $3.1 million, with himself as the sole beneficiary. The premiums are being paid automatically from his checking account. $3.1 million. More money than Pat could earn in 40 years at his current job. And Katie had no idea the policy existed. "There's more," Ray said. "I found evidence of an affair. Woman named Madison Torres, 22 years old, Instagram influencer type. Lives in Miami Beach. Based on their social media activity and some financial records I was able to access, he's been supporting her lifestyle for at least 8 months. Expensive restaurants, designer clothes, trips to exotic locations, plastic surgery." "How expensive are we talking?" "Conservative estimate? About $50,000 over the past 8 months. Money he didn't have, which explains the gambling and credit card debt." The picture was becoming crystal clear. Pat needed money desperately. Katie's life insurance policy would solve all his problems, pay off his debts, fund his lifestyle with Madison, and give him enough left over to live comfortably for the rest of his life. All he had to do was kill his wife slowly enough that it looked like natural causes. Ray, I need you to document everything. Photos, financial records, communication between Pat and this Madison woman. I want a complete timeline of the affair, the insurance policy, and the debt accumulation. Already working on it. I'll have a comprehensive report within 12 hours. I spent that night at the hospital, sitting beside Katie's bed in the uncomfortable reclining chair, watching her breathe with the help of machines. The dialysis equipment hummed quietly in the corner, steadily cleaning her blood of the poison her husband had been feeding her for months. She looked peaceful, almost like she was just sleeping, but the doctors said she might not regain consciousness for several days. I held her hand and made a promise. Pat was going to pay for what he'd done, but it was going to happen the right way, legal, systematic, and absolutely devastating. He would face justice through the courts, and he would spend the rest of his life in prison thinking about what he'd tried to do. But first, I needed him to confess. Katie's eyes opened at 6:22 a.m. on Thursday morning, November 21st. I was reading the Seattle Times financial section in the chair beside her bed when I heard her whisper, "Dad?" "I'm here, sweetheart." I put down the newspaper and took her hand. She tried to sit up, but the effort made her dizzy and nauseous. "What happened? Where am I?" "You're in the hospital. You've been very sick, but you're going to be okay now." "Where's Pat? Is he here?" Her voice was weak, but I could hear the concern for her husband. I'd been dreading this question. "He's handling some things. Don't worry about that right now. Just focus on getting better." "I feel awful. How long have I been here?" 3 days. You've been unconscious since you were admitted." Dr. Stevens arrived 20 minutes later for her morning rounds. She checked Katie's vital signs, reviewed the dialysis readings, and examined the color of her skin and eyes. Her expression was cautiously optimistic. "Your kidney function is improving significantly," she told Katie. "We should be able to reduce the dialysis sessions starting tomorrow, and if things continue progressing this well, you could be out of here within a week." "A week?" Katie looked confused and frightened. "I've been unconscious for 3 days. I don't remember any of this." "That's normal with the type of poisoning you experienced," Dr. Stevens said gently. "Your body was working very hard to process toxins, and unconsciousness was actually protective." "Poisoning?" Katie stared at Dr. Stevens, then at me. "What kind of poisoning?" "We'll discuss all the details when you're feeling stronger," Dr. Stevens said. "Right now, the important thing is that you're going to make a full recovery." After Dr. Stevens left, Katie turned to me with questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Dad, what really happened? Pat said I'd been feeling sick for months, but I don't remember being this sick. And why isn't he here? Why won't anyone tell me where my husband is?" "Katie, there are some things we need to discuss, but not right now. You need to focus on recovering." "You're scaring me. I don't mean to scare you, but I need you to trust me on this. There are some complications we need to work through, and I want to make sure you're strong enough to handle difficult news." My phone buzzed with a text from Ray Morrison. "Full report complete. You need to see this immediately. Can you meet at the office?" I kissed Katie's forehead. "I'll be back in 2 hours. Try to rest and don't worry about anything except getting better." "Dad, please tell me Pat is okay. Please tell me nothing happened to him." "Pat is fine, sweetheart. I promise you that." Ray met me in the conference room at Morrison Investigations with a thick folder and a grim expression that told me everything I needed to know before he said a word. "Chuck, this is worse than we thought." He spread documents across the conference table: bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, social media screenshots, insurance paperwork, and photographs that made my blood run cold. "The timeline is damning," Ray said, pointing to a detailed chart he'd created. "Pat started the affair with Madison Torres 10 months ago. The gambling debts began accumulating around the same time. He was spending money on her that he didn't have, trying to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. 8 months ago, he approached Katie about applying for a large life insurance policy. She refused, said they didn't need that much coverage. So he forged her signature? That's exactly what he did. The insurance application has Katie's signature, but handwriting analysis shows it's a forgery. He also falsified her medical information to get better rates. Ray handed me a copy of the insurance application. Katie's signature looked close, but it wasn't quite right. After 30 years of seeing her sign Christmas cards and birthday cards, I could tell the difference. The insurance fraud is a felony by itself, Ray continued, but it gets worse. 6 months ago, he bought the antifreeze from Home Depot. 4 months ago, Katie started getting sick. The insurance policy went into effect 3 months ago after the waiting period ended. What about this Madison woman? She's not just his girlfriend. She's a co-conspirator. Ray pulled out printed emails that made my stomach turn. These are from Pat's Gmail account to Madison Torres, sent over the past 2 months. I read the first email dated September 15th. Madison, Katie's getting sicker exactly like we planned. Doctor said her kidneys are starting to fail. Should be over soon. Then we can be together with enough money to live anywhere we want. Just need to be patient a little longer. The insurance money will set us up for life. Love you. The second email was dated October 30th. Baby, I know you're getting impatient, but we have to be careful. Katie almost went to the doctor last week, but I convinced her it was just work stress. I'm increasing the dose slightly to speed things up. Should be done within a month. Then we can get married and start our real life together. He documented his own crime, I said, staring at the emails. Gets worse. Look at this one from November 10th. The third email made me want to put my fist through the wall. Madison. Katie collapsed this morning and I called 911. Had to play the concerned husband, but inside I'm celebrating. The doctors think it's kidney failure from unknown causes. Perfect. She'll be dead within a week and then we collect the money and disappear. Can't wait to hold you and our baby. Madison Torres is pregnant, Ray said quietly. 8 weeks along, according to medical records I was able to access through unofficial channels. Pat wasn't just trying to kill Katie for money. He was trying to kill her so he could start a new life with another woman and their child. He'd been planning this for almost a year, slowly poisoning my daughter while building a new relationship and preparing to cash in on her death. Ray, I want you to contact the Miami-Dade Police Department immediately. Pat's still in Florida, which gives us an opportunity. I want him arrested the moment he tries to board a plane back to Seattle. On what charges? Attempted murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and whatever else the prosecutors can make stick. Chuck, are you sure you want to involve the police at this stage? Once we do that, you lose control of how this plays out. I thought about Katie lying in that hospital bed, about the months of poison Pat had fed her, about the emails where he celebrated her suffering and planned to collect money from her death. I'm sure, but first I want to have a conversation with him myself. That could be dangerous. No, I said, looking at the pile of evidence on the table. What's dangerous is underestimating how far a father will go to protect his daughter. Pat returned from Miami on Friday afternoon, November 22nd. I knew exactly when because I'd been monitoring his flight through a contact at SeaTac Airport, one of the advantages of having business relationships throughout the city. His Instagram showed him boarding a Delta flight in Miami at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, with a caption about, "Heading home to be with my beautiful wife during this difficult time." The bastard was still playing the devoted husband role for his social media followers. The surveillance team I'd hired confirmed Pat arrived at his house at 2:45 p.m. He spent exactly 37 minutes there, probably showering and changing clothes to remove any evidence of his Florida vacation. Then he drove to Mercy General Hospital. I was waiting in Katie's room when Pat walked in at 4:15 p.m., carrying a bouquet of expensive roses and wearing what he probably thought was an appropriately concerned expression. He stopped short when he saw me sitting in the visitor's chair. "Chuck? I didn't know you were back in town, Pat." I stood up slowly but didn't offer to shake hands. "We need to talk." Of course. How is she? Any change since this morning?" Katie was awake but pretending to sleep. We'd discussed this plan earlier. She wanted to hear what Pat would say when he thought she couldn't hear him. The doctors had told her about the poisoning, and while she was still struggling to accept that her husband had tried to kill her, she was strong enough to help gather evidence. "She's been in and out of consciousness," I said. "The doctors aren't sure when she'll fully wake up." Pat moved to Katie's bedside and took her hand with what appeared to be genuine tenderness. The sight of him touching her made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to remain calm and observant. "I'm so sorry I had to leave," he said, speaking to Katie's apparently unconscious form. "There was a work emergency in Miami. a client crisis that required my immediate attention. I came back as soon as I could arrange coverage. A client crisis, I repeated. That's interesting. I was under the impression you worked for a marketing consulting firm here in Seattle. Pat looked uncomfortable. It's complicated. We have clients all over the country, and sometimes they need hands-on support. Must be nice working for a company that sends you to Miami on short notice. Expensive hotels, yacht parties, that sort of high-end client entertainment. Now Pat looked genuinely nervous. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Chuck. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of his Instagram story from Tuesday afternoon. I'm getting at the fact that while your wife was fighting for her life in intensive care, you were on a yacht in Miami with another woman. Pat's face went through several color changes, pale, then red, then pale again. Chuck, I can explain that. I'm sure you can. Just like you can explain the $3.1 million life insurance policy you took out on Katie without her knowledge. The blood drained completely from Pat's face. How did you find out about, just like you can explain the $165,000 in gambling debts, and the forged signature on the insurance application, and the antifreeze you bought from Home Depot 4 months ago? Pat sat down heavily in the visitor's chair, his hands shaking. Chuck, this isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you've been systematically poisoning my daughter for months, planning to collect on her life insurance policy and start a new life with your pregnant girlfriend in Miami. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. I understand perfectly. I stood up and walked to the door, where Detective Sarah Williams from the Seattle Police Department was waiting in the hallway. Detective Williams, you can come in now. That's when Katie opened her eyes and spoke for the first time since Pat had entered the room. Hello, Pat. I heard everything. The next few hours unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Detective Williams read Pat his Miranda rights, while Pat alternated between complete denials and attempts to blame his actions on gambling addiction, financial pressure, and Madison Torres's influence. She made me do it, he said at one point. Madison said Katie would never give me a divorce, and this was the only way we could be together. So you decided to murder her, Detective Williams said. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to make her sick enough that she'd die, Katie said from her hospital bed, staring at her husband with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of cold disappointment that reminded me of her mother when Sarah had been betrayed by someone she trusted. Katie, please, you have to understand. I understand that you were going to let me die slowly and painfully while you celebrated with another woman. Dr. Stevens joined us as Pat was being prepared for transport to the county jail. Katie, there's something else you need to know. The blood tests revealed something the poisoning initially masked. You're pregnant, 8 weeks along, and it appears to be twins. The silence in the room was absolute. Katie stared at Dr. Stevens, then at me, then at Pat, who was handcuffed and flanked by 2 police officers. He was trying to kill 3 people, Katie said quietly. That's when the full magnitude of what had almost happened hit me like a physical blow. Pat hadn't just been trying to murder Katie. He'd been trying to murder my grandchildren, children who might have been his own flesh and blood. The irony was devastating. While Pat was planning to start a new family with Madison Torres, he was simultaneously trying to murder the family he already had with Katie. I called Marcus Thompson from the hospital corridor. Marcus, I want the charges upgraded immediately. This isn't just attempted murder of Katie anymore. It's attempted murder of 3 people, Katie and 2 unborn children. Chuck, the law regarding fetal homicide charges is complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Use whatever resources you need. Hire whatever specialists are required. I want Patrick Walsh to face the maximum possible penalty for what he tried to do. Katie spent 6 more days in the hospital, recovering her physical strength and beginning to process the psychological trauma of learning that the person she'd trusted most in the world had been systematically trying to kill her for months. I stayed with her every day, sleeping in the reclining chair beside her bed and coordinating with the legal team that was building the case against Pat. We talked about many things during those long days and nights. Her marriage, her pregnancy, her future, and the fact that she'd have to rebuild her entire life from scratch. I feel so incredibly stupid, she said on her 4th day in the hospital. How did I not see what he was doing? How did I not realize that someone I loved was trying to murder me? Because you're not a sociopath, I told her. Normal, healthy people don't expect someone they love to try to poison them. Your trust in Pat wasn't stupidity, it was love. He exploited that love, which makes him a monster, not you a fool. But there must have been signs, things I should have noticed. Pat was extremely good at hiding who he really was. That's what made him so dangerous. He was intelligent, charming, and completely without conscience. Those are the most dangerous predators, the ones who can smile while they're destroying you. Katie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, I need to ask you for something, and I need you to promise you'll say yes." "What is it?" "I want to move back home, not permanently, but until the babies are born and I can figure out what comes next. I don't think I can trust my own judgment about people anymore, and I need to feel safe. Of course you can come home. You never needed to ask permission for that. And I want you to teach me how you figured out what Pat was doing so quickly. I want to learn how to protect myself and my children from people like him." That's when I realized Katie wasn't just asking to come home for safety. She was asking me to teach her how to be suspicious, how to verify trust instead of simply giving it, how to recognize predators before they could hurt her family. It broke my heart a little because I knew it meant Katie would never again have the kind of innocent trust she'd had before. But I also understood it was necessary for her survival. The trial of Patrick Walsh began 8 months later, in July of the following year. Katie was visibly pregnant by then, her twin boys healthy and active, due to arrive in early September. She testified for 4 hours about the months of gradual illness, the symptoms she'd attributed to work stress, and the morning she collapsed at home while Pat watched and called 911. Pat's defense attorney, a public defender named Jennifer Mills, tried to paint the poisoning as accidental contamination rather than deliberate murder attempt. She argued that Pat had been using antifreeze for legitimate automotive purposes and that Katie had somehow been exposed accidentally. That argument fell apart completely when the prosecution introduced Pat's emails to Madison Torres, the detailed timeline of his financial problems, and the forged insurance application. Ray Morrison's investigation had been so thorough that the prosecution had a minute-by-minute account of Pat's actions over the previous year. Madison Torres testified for the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. She confirmed that Pat had told her about his plan to get Katie out of the picture so they could be together, and that they'd discussed moving to the Caribbean or South America after collecting the insurance money. Her medical records confirmed she was carrying Pat's child, and her financial records showed that Pat had been supporting her expensive lifestyle with money he didn't have. Did Patrick Walsh ever discuss specific methods for harming his wife? The prosecutor asked Madison during her testimony. Yes. He said he'd researched different poisons online and decided that antifreeze would be the best because it would look like kidney disease or some other natural illness. He said doctors wouldn't think to test for it unless they had reason to suspect poisoning. Did he express any remorse or concern about his wife's suffering? No. He said it was necessary for our future together. He said Katie would never agree to a divorce, and this was the only way he could get the money to pay off his debts and start over with me. The prosecution also introduced evidence of Pat's internet search history, which included dozens of queries about ethylene glycol poisoning, symptoms of kidney failure, and life insurance policies. He'd been researching murder methods for over 6 months before he started poisoning Katie. Dr. Stevens testified about Katie's condition when she was admitted to the hospital and the testing that revealed the poisoning. Without Mr. Donovan's insistence on comprehensive toxicology testing, we might never have identified the cause of Katie's kidney failure. By the time we would have discovered the poisoning through normal diagnostic procedures, it would have been too late. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Pat was convicted on all charges, 3 counts of attempted murder, Katie and the twins, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. The judge sentenced him to 23 years in state prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. "Mr. Walsh," the judge said during sentencing, "you systematically poisoned your wife over a period of months, planning to profit from her death while she suffered in agony. You showed no remorse, no conscience, and no regard for human life. You represent a clear and ongoing danger to society. Madison Torres received 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service for her role as an accessory to attempted murder. She was also required to pay restitution to cover Katie's medical expenses. Katie gave birth to twin boys, James Charles and Samuel Patrick, 2 weeks after the trial ended. They were healthy, beautiful, and completely unaware of the man who had tried to kill them before they were born. Katie legally changed their last names to Donovan and filed for divorce while Pat was being processed into the state prison system. I held my grandsons for the first time in the same hospital where Katie had nearly died, and I made them the same promise I'd made to Katie 30 years earlier. No one would ever hurt them while I was alive to prevent it. But this time, I also made a different promise. I would teach them to be smart about trust, to verify before they believed, and to protect themselves from predators who wore the masks of love. 2 years have passed since Pat's conviction. Katie and the boys live in the guest wing of my house in Bellevue, which had been designed for multi-generational living when Sarah and I built it 15 years ago. Katie started intensive therapy to deal with the trauma of learning that someone she loved had tried to murder her, and she's slowly begun to trust her own judgment again. But we've also established new boundaries and security measures, practical rules that protect her and the children without controlling their lives. First, anyone who wants to be part of Katie's or the boys' lives undergoes a thorough background check conducted by Ray Morrison's firm. Katie initially resisted this, calling it paranoid and excessive, but I convinced her it was simply the price of safety in a world where predators could wear the mask of love and devotion. Second, I've established trust funds for James and Samuel that can't be accessed by any future husband or partner Katie might have. The money will be theirs when they turn 25, but no one will be able to manipulate Katie into giving them access to it. The trust documents are ironclad, reviewed by 3 different law firms, and completely beyond the reach of anyone except the boys themselves. Third, we've developed a communication protocol. Katie checks in with me every other day, just like we did before her marriage to Pat, but now it's explicitly a safety measure rather than simply family connection. If she ever goes more than 48 hours without contact, I assume something is wrong and take action accordingly. These aren't perfect solutions, and they don't address the fundamental problem of trust in human relationships. But they're practical measures that make it much harder for someone to hurt my family again. Katie started dating again when the boys were 18 months old. She introduced me to each person she was serious about, and while I didn't interfere in her relationships, I did conduct discreet investigations of anyone she brought home. She knew about this and had given her explicit permission. She met Dr. Robert Stevens, Dr. Rebecca Stevens' nephew, at a teachers' conference in Portland. He was a high school mathematics teacher, divorced with 1 daughter from his previous marriage. His background check came back completely clean. No debts beyond a reasonable mortgage, no criminal history, no red flags in his financial or personal life. But more importantly, he was patient with Katie's caution and understanding about her need to move slowly in any relationship. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged, and another year before getting married. Robert legally adopted James and Samuel, giving them a father who would protect and nurture them rather than harm them. I walked Katie down the aisle at her second wedding, and this time I didn't have to wonder whether I was handing her over to someone who would cherish her or someone who would destroy her. The difference was that we'd all learned the price of blind trust. Robert understood why Katie needed background checks for new people in their lives. He understood why she had panic attacks when she felt sick. He understood why she needed to know where he was and what he was doing when they were apart, and he never once complained about the security measures or called them excessive. I'd rather live with reasonable precautions than lose the woman I love to someone who wants to hurt her, he told me once. That's when I knew Katie had chosen wisely the second time. 5 years after Pat's conviction, I'm sitting in my office looking at recent photographs of Katie, Robert, and the boys. James and Samuel are 7 years old now, happy and healthy children who have no memory of their biological father and no knowledge of what he tried to do to them and their mother. Katie is pregnant again, a daughter, due in March, and radiant with the kind of happiness that comes from feeling truly safe. Pat is still in Walla Walla State Penitentiary. He'll be eligible for parole when he's 52 years old, but given the nature of his crimes and his complete lack of remorse, it's unlikely he'll ever be released early. Madison Torres moved back to Texas after her probation ended and is raising Pat's daughter as a single mother. She sends occasional updates through the Victim Services Coordinator, mostly to let us know she's doing well and that her daughter is healthy. I've thought extensively about the lessons learned from this experience. Trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan used to say about nuclear disarmament treaties. Love doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking or common sense. Protecting your family doesn't mean controlling their lives, but it does mean staying vigilant and taking reasonable precautions. Katie and I have discussed many times what would have happened if I hadn't returned early from that Los Angeles business trip. The doctors estimated that she probably had another week before the kidney damage became irreversible and fatal. Pat might have succeeded in committing the perfect murder, collecting the insurance money, and starting his new life with Madison while my daughter died slowly in a hospital bed. The restaurant business taught me that success comes from attention to detail, careful planning, and surrounding yourself with trustworthy people who share your values. Those same principles apply to protecting the people you love. You can't eliminate all risks. Life is inherently dangerous. But you can minimize threats by staying alert, asking questions, and trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. I established the Catherine Donovan Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention 3 years ago. It provides funding for background check services for women entering new relationships. And it trains healthcare providers to recognize the signs of deliberate poisoning and other forms of domestic abuse. The foundation has helped identify 17 cases of systematic poisoning in 5 years, cases that might have gone undetected without specific training and testing protocols. But the most important lesson I learned is this. There's a crucial difference between being paranoid and being prepared. Paranoia assumes everyone is a threat and prevents you from building meaningful relationships. Preparation acknowledges that some people are threats and takes reasonable precautions to identify them before they can cause harm. Katie learned this lesson too, though it cost her the ability to trust easily and completely. She's happier now with Robert than she ever was with Pat, but it's a different kind of happiness, one built on verified trust rather than blind faith. My grandsons will grow up understanding that love and vigilance aren't mutually exclusive. They'll learn to trust people who earn that trust through consistent actions over time. They'll understand that protecting yourself and your family isn't about being suspicious of everyone. It's about being smart about the people you allow into your inner circle. The price of safety isn't paranoia or isolation. It's attention, preparation, and the wisdom to know that some people wear masks of love while planning destruction. Pat made one fundamental mistake in his plan to murder Katie and collect the insurance money. He assumed that because I was a businessman, I would approach the situation like a typical business problem, rationally, dispassionately, focused on minimizing damage and moving forward quickly. He was partially right. I did approach it like a business problem, but he misunderstood what that meant. In business, when someone tries to cheat you, steal from you, or destroy what you've built, you don't just defend yourself and hope it doesn't happen again. You make absolutely certain they can never threaten you or anyone else again. Justice isn't always about punishment for its own sake. Sometimes it's about prevention, making sure that someone who has demonstrated their willingness to hurt innocent people can't do it again. Pat will spend the next 18 years in prison, not just because he tried to kill Katie and my grandsons, but because keeping him there prevents him from trying to kill someone else's daughter, someone else's grandchildren. That's the coldest lesson of all, and the most necessary one. Some people forfeit their right to freedom when they demonstrate they'll use that freedom to harm innocent people. The justice system recognized this truth when they sentenced Pat to 23 years in prison. I sleep well at night knowing he's exactly where he belongs, and that my family is safe from the monster who once sat at our dinner table, smiled at our family jokes, and planned to murder us for money. The boys are calling from the backyard now, something about a treehouse they're building with Robert's help. Katie is laughing as she watches them work, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. Robert is patiently explaining the proper way to nail boards together, the kind of father every child deserves. This is what victory looks like, not revenge or the destruction of enemies, but the simple ability to live without fear. Not the absence of threats, but the presence of wisdom and vigilance. Not perfect safety, which doesn't exist, but reasonable precautions that allow love and trust to flourish within appropriate boundaries. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and my family is sleeping safely upstairs, I allow myself a moment of cold satisfaction, knowing that the man who tried to take all of this away is sitting in a concrete cell, counting the years until he's too old to be a threat to anyone. That's not revenge. That's justice. And justice served cold is justice served correctly.